Next, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to bring to you Mark McCarran from the Torrington Historical Society. Mark.
My first job here is to coordinate an audience with the muralist, Ben Kelly, who is about to appear in the upper window. Come out for some applause. Wonderful job. Let's hear it for Ben. Steve's been dying to use that window all day, so I'm glad he found an appropriate use for it. Honorable Mayor Shante Reynolds. No, you don't have to stand up. I just want to acknowledge you. Not your turn. Yes, Shante Reynolds, Torrington's Juneteenth mayor. Let's have a round of applause. Friends and neighbors, I am pleased to represent the Torrington Historical Society here today on the first Juneteenth national holiday and to dedicate this marvelous Martin Luther King 39 mural promoting racial equity and civil rights in Torrington, Connecticut, and America. 21 years ago, the Torrington Historical Society merged with the John Brown Association. In that merger, the Historical Society acquired another mission, that of preserving the history and memory of John Brown. And I believe it's appropriate that John Brown be included with Martin Luther King on this mural, because not only was he an abolitionist born in Torrington, but like Amanda Gorman and Martin Luther King Jr., Brown spoke passionately and eloquently for the cause of racial equality and civil rights in America. This image of John Brown on the mural puts him front and center in the public's awareness, along with Martin Luther King Jr. and Amanda Gorman. So I want to thank everyone who helped to make this mural possible, particularly the aforementioned Ben Keller, whose vision and skill is on display here. Although I can't speak to Ben's vision, as an historian, I can provide a little bit of context for the figures you see in the mural. I don't know if you know this or not, but when an anti-slavery society formed in Torrington in 1837, that's pretty early in the abolitionist movement. Those abolitionists that got together here in downtown Torrington were actually driven away from the center by an angry mob banging pots and pans. That didn't deter them in their mission, though. They organized and were a force for the abolition of slavery up until the time of the Civil War. Across the river from here, across Water Street, before these more modern buildings were built, there was a cotton mill on the banks of the Naugatuck River. That mill was the largest employer in Torrington up until the time of the Civil War. The mill owners and those who profited from the cotton cloth business had little or no concern for the suffering of the black slaves who produced the cotton crop in the southern states. This was the America where John Brown came of age. He was born just 24 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And he came to revere that document, particularly the phrase, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." And it's no surprise that 100 years after the abolition of slavery, that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. referenced that same passage from the Declaration of Independence in his I Have a Dream speech. It was a recognition by Dr. King that racial equality was still not a reality in America. John Brown, unlike most other abolitionists of his time, really believed in racial equality, and he led by example. He shared his dinner table with African Americans. He worked side by side with them in the fight to end slavery. He treated them as equals, and he fully identified with their suffering. It's important to note that Brown had a much larger goal in mind than just ending slavery. he wanted to remake America as a nation where all men and women, including African Americans and Native Americans, had freedom, equality, and yes, voting rights. John Brown also had a dream, as you can see, and that dream was aligned with the dream of Martin Luther King, Jr. It's also interesting that the transcendentalist from Concord, Massachusetts, Henry David Thoreau, a contemporary of John Brown, was a touchstone for both John Brown and Martin Luther King, even though Brown and King lived a century apart. Thoreau supported John Brown's resistance to the evil of slavery, and Martin Luther King was inspired by Thoreau's concept of resisting evil through nonviolent civil disobedience. Thoreau wrote the following words about John Brown, but if Thoreau had been alive during the life of Martin Luther King, I believe Thoreau would have written the same words about Reverend King. And here are those words. He was a superior man. No man in America has ever stood up so persistently and effectively for the dignity of human nature. In that sense, he was the most American of all. And now I think it's appropriate to close with a few words from, at least my remarks, with a few words from Amanda Gorman's inaugural poem, because Amanda Gorman is the present-day embodiment of passion and eloquence in the cause of racial equality and civil rights. And here's a few lines from that poem. Yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. Thank you.